Today, I am so excited to welcome Lisa Pubantz to Hope Survives podcast. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Christabel. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited for you to share your story with our listeners. So, I first met Lisa, goodness, it has to be maybe 5 years ago now. I was singing at an event with a Christian radio station down in North Carolina at the mall, and Lisa came. And we met there, and she shared some of her brain injury story with me. And from there, she joined my online Hope After Head Injury support group. And you've been a very active member for years. You're always on the live chats, and you come to our Zoom groups. And I've just loved getting to know you over the years and getting to know your story. And your story is so inspiring, and your perseverance continually inspires me. And so I invited Lisa to come on the podcast so she can share her story with all of you because she's amazing. So thanks for taking the time to do this.
Well, thank you for having me. Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, we met at the mall and I shared some of my story. I'm actually very much an introvert. And so I kind of keep to myself, but you were so welcoming to me and so accepting of just wanting to hear my story. And so that made it easier for me to share. And
Aww.
and so I have really warmed up to you and to your Hope Survives and Hope After Head Injury group. And just everybody is so welcoming and helps me to feel comfortable in my vulnerability. So I see this as an opportunity for me to share my story and hopefully help somebody else feel at ease with what they're going through. So thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. You're amazing. So Lisa has such an interesting perspective on brain injury because of the nature of her story. And we're going to be focusing a little bit on the tension between invisible disability and the invisible brain injury and a visible disability because Lisa has both. So do you want to just start off and share some of your story and get right into it?
Sure. Well, I think to really share my story, I have to actually start at the beginning of my life. I was born with a physical disability known as Spina Bifida, and that's just, it means my spinal cord wasn't completely formed and formed correctly when I was, conceived. And so when I was born, it resulted in me having weakness in my legs. I walk with crutches. I use a wheelchair for longer distances. It also comes along with hydrocephalus, which is fluid on the brain that has to be drained with a shunt tube. And so that also put pressure on my brain. So I've actually had a brain injury since birth. And it's interesting with my spina bifida, I've had a lot of opportunities to participate in wheelchair sports. One of the sports that I participated in was wheelchair basketball. And it was through wheelchair basketball that I actually suffered my traumatic brain injury. In 2011, I accidentally flipped my wheelchair when I was going through basketball practice. I flipped my wheelchair and my head met the basketball court floor. And next thing I know, I have a traumatic brain injury to the left side. It's a left temporal lobe injury. And I lost 15% of my hearing in my left ear. And when I got to the emergency room, they were checking me in and asking me to sign all the paperwork for insurance. And I could not think of my own name. I had narrowed it down to 2 choices, but I can tell you neither of those choices were my name. They were either Mickey Mouse or Jesus Christ. But, it's interesting that God pulled me through that situation. To this day, I still have issues with memory loss, with aphasia, and with hearing loss also. But I'm alive and I'm doing well, and I am here advocating on behalf of people with disabilities, such as opportunities just like this.
That's great, Lisa. And you are on the advisory council for the Spina Bifida Association, right? And
Yes.
you also do some volunteering. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yes. Actually, I have been advocating for people with disabilities almost literally since I could talk. When I was maybe 3 years old, I was the poster child for the March of Dimes Birth Defects Foundation. And I was poster child at the local level, the regional level, and then the statewide level for 3 years running. I was 3, 4, and 5 years old. Since then, I've also worked with the Spina Bifida Association. I am currently on the advisory council for the Spina Bifida Association of the Carolinas. That covers both North and South Carolina. And I also volunteer as a summer camp counselor for kids with disabilities at Camp Carefree in Stokesdale, North Carolina. They've been in operation since 1986, and I was one of their original campers during their Spina Bifida week. And I've been very blessed and fortunate to return as a camp counselor. So now I get to give back to the camp and give the kids an opportunity to have a summer camp experience, much like I had 20, 30 years ago.
That's amazing. And it must be so great to be volunteering as a counselor and also knowing what it's like to live with spina bifida. Do a lot of the counselors also have spina bifida and are in wheelchairs? And
that there is a handful of us, maybe 5 or 6 of us that do have spina bifida. And it's really interesting to see the whole dynamic from both perspectives, being a camper and then coming back to be a counselor. And I'll tell you what, it gives me a lot of respect for my parents and how they brought me up and all the things that they had to deal with to bring me up with a disability, because now I'm on the caregiver side of it. And it's just really interesting to watch the kids who may not have had an experience at summer camp and may not have had the experience of taking care of themselves, but to see their growth and their level of independence just grow and develop over even just 1 week with them. And to see their achievements and their accomplishments despite having a disability. So many times when you grow up with a disability, there's people in society who are going to tell you, no, you can't do this, or let me do this for you. And I don't want you to do this because I don't want you to get hurt. But there are so many things that people with disabilities can do. And to watch these kids be able to accomplish that and feel that sense of accomplishment, it's so rewarding.
that's great. So you mentioned that you play wheelchair basketball. That's how you got your TBI. You
Yes.
also do wheelchair marathons. You have done
Yes, I've done 5K and 10K races.
5K. That's amazing.
Yeah, I haven't worked up to a half marathon yet or a marathon, but
I'm not a runner, so I said marathon, but I don't really, I don't
right.
fully think about the specifics, but you do racing. Yes.
Yes. I transitioned to that after I injured myself playing basketball. I tried to look for something that was a little less contact sport. And just the sense of camaraderie that I've gotten with other runners, because I was the only wheelchair racer in a field of hundreds of runners on foot. And just to see the camaraderie and the support that I've gotten, I'm blessed that I live in a community that is very friendly to people with disabilities, and people are looking out for me and making sure the road is safe for me to race on. So,
Wow. So you mentioned something very casually that I think is worth talking about. You said that after you got your brain injury playing wheelchair basketball, you found something else to do, which was racing.
yes.
And I think you just mentioned it so casually, but there's a lot of emotion that comes into that of realizing, wow, my injury has affected me that I can't do this. And
Right.
what was that process like for you finding something else and having that drive to even try something new?
Honestly, at first it was a gut punch because I had always pictured myself playing wheelchair basketball. When I was younger, I would watch the Paralympics and I would watch wheelchair basketball, and I was like, that's going to be me someday. I'm going to the Paralympics and I'm going to play wheelchair basketball. And so when I hurt myself and realized that basketball probably wasn't the best sport for me, I felt like my dream had been taken away from me. I felt like, you know, what else is there for me? And I have to say that it was really just the encouragement of other people that really brought me into wheelchair racing. I'm fortunate that I live just a couple of blocks from our local YMCA. And so I started going there just casually, just to meet some other people that I had already really known because my brothers swam on the swim team at the Y. So I went there first just to kind of hang out with people I knew. But then they really started talking to me about, hey, how about you work out, and how about you build up your strength and focus on the abilities that you have. And I met somebody there who already was into racing, and they said, you know what, maybe you can do this. I know it's a whole lot of runners, but maybe we can fit you in with your wheelchair and make it wheelchair friendly for you. And so I got into it, and it was a really great experience. Just knowing that I had other people encouraging me and actually supporting me, that really motivated me to want to do it.
The
Yeah.
importance of support, that's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah. So as I said before, I'm an introvert. So me having the motivation to do it myself, I probably wouldn't have. So
But you did it.
I did. Yeah.
And I love seeing the pictures of you crossing the finish line.
Yes. It's for me, it's not about getting the medal. It's not about coming in first place, but for me, it was about making the choice to just cross that starting line. That's victory for me.
I love that. Crossing the starting line. Oh,
Yeah.
so great. So, Lisa, I want to go back to when you got your traumatic brain injury.
Yes.
I have heard your story before, and so I know that there is something that you kind of glossed over before, but you had mentioned previously to me, or I think maybe in our Zoom support group, about how the side of your head that you fell on and what that impacted. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So when I had my brain injury, it was during basketball practice. And from what I can remember, I had gotten the front wheels of my wheelchair kind of caught up in somebody else's wheelchair. They had the ball, I was on defense, and I played some hardcore defense. So I was really going after the ball. I got my wheels caught up in theirs, and I noticed it, and I tried to pull out of it. But as I did that, I was also off center of my balance because I was also reaching for the ball. And so my chair flipped upwards, and then it flipped to the side, and it flipped to the left side. And I see that as a blessing now, because I mentioned before that I have hydrocephalus that requires a shunt. The shunt is on my right side of my head. And so for me to fall on my left side of my head, that means I fell on the opposite side from where the shunt is. My doctor said that if I had suffered the same injury on the right side of my head, I would have broken the shunt, and the fluid in my brain would have swelled up to the point that I basically would have drowned in my own brain fluid, and I would have died that night instead of making it to the emergency room. So.
Wow. So had you fallen in a different way on the other side, you wouldn't be here today.
And we wouldn't be having this conversation. Yeah.
Wow. Now, what are the emotions that come with that, of knowing that?
It's humbling. At first, when I suffered my injury, I was very mad. I was very angry because there were so many things that I couldn't do anymore. I couldn't hear very well in my ear. And there was a moment where I stood up and had the strength to stand up, but I couldn't remember how to walk. And there were moments where I couldn't remember my own name. There were moments when, I couldn't remember an automatic process, something that, is automatic to me. It was more of a deliberate having to think through it sort of thing. And I can remember being angry about that. But to know that God spared me from death, that's humbling, because now I have an opportunity to do something with the life that I still have. And it's an opportunity for me to just keep going. One of my mottos is just keep pushing forward. And what I noticed about that night is that my basketball career may have ended, but my life didn't. My life did not stop. It was just another different starting point for me. And so I just have to keep pushing forward and find a different road to take. It may not be basketball, but it can be something else. And for me right now, it's disability advocacy. So.
That's beautiful. I feel myself tearing up a little bit hearing you talk, Lisa. Through your darkest night, hope survives.